The first time I saw the man, he was backing out of my driveway like he owned the damn place. Sleek suit, tinted windows, the kind of smooth confidence that only comes with being comfortable in someone else's home. In my home. I stood half-shadowed behind the blinds, heart kicking harder than it should have for someone just watching a car pull away. He didn't look around, didn't hesitate, just reversed with the ease of someone who'd done it before. That image etched itself in my head, right down to the glossy reflection of our maple tree in his windshield. Something inside me clicked, and not in a good way. I waited until Mia got home later that day. She kissed me casually, commented on dinner, and asked if the kids finished their homework. Everything about her felt normal, maybe too normal. That night when she showered, I checked the cameras, or tried to. The logs from the past 4 days were gone, cleaned out. No error messages, just wiped. I never set the system to auto-delete. I stared at the blank footage list longer than I care to admit, feeling that creeping sense of dread curl up my spine. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I changed tactics. I rerouted the home surveillance to a private cloud archive and replaced the porch camera with a smaller, hidden one tucked behind the motion sensor. It had no blinking lights, no startup beeps, just a cold, silent lens watching everything. 2 nights later, I told her I had to fly to Houston for a client meeting. She didn't even blink, kissed me goodbye and reminded me to call the kids. I parked my car 2 blocks down and returned on foot, hood up, slipping through side alleys like I'd done something wrong. I sat in the neighbor's backyard behind their old swing set with my tablet in my lap. Wi-Fi boosted, watching our house. At 8:47 p.m., headlights pulled into the driveway. Same sleek car, same man. This time he walked right up and knocked. She opened the door, smiled. Her eyes softened the way they used to, only for me. I watched her take his hand and lead him inside. I recorded everything. The rest of the night, I didn't sleep. I crept to his car and peeked in. In the back seat, he'd left a gym bag. Inside were 3 cards, each one handwritten. Romantic, familiar. Worse, one held a photograph of her, Mia, in that yellow sundress she only wore once last summer. She hated that picture when I took it, said it made her look too real. He carried it like a trophy. 3 days later, I paid a visit to the cafe next to her supposed office and got friendly with one of her coworkers over coffee. When I casually mentioned the company name, she looked confused. Turned out Mia hadn't been working there for months. She'd told them she was on a special sabbatical for family reasons. She told me she worked late every Thursday. I clenched my jaw so hard I tasted blood. The next morning, I told her I'd take her to work, said my car was in the shop and I needed hers. She hesitated for a second too long. That was all I needed. When she finally agreed, I used the moment she showered to attach a GPS tracker to her keys. Sleek and silent. Synced to my phone in less than 3 taps. It took 5 days of watching that blinking dot, pinging across intersections and office parks. Then one Friday morning, it stopped at a country property an hour away. The name on the deed was a surname I'd never heard. Mia said it was her cousin's place. I drove out there under the guise of a contractor, complete with a reflective vest and fake clipboard. They were there, her and him, and 2 kids, small, maybe 6 and 4. I watched from the fence line as the children called her Mama. My lungs felt like they collapsed in real time. I installed a second camera near the barn under cover of rain and wind. The footage showed her living a life, a parallel universe just off the highway. She cooked there, tucked them in. She laughed like she hadn't in years. My fingers shook so hard I dropped the tablet trying to upload the footage. I returned home and started burning bridges with surgical precision. Our joint streaming subscriptions? Gone. The house Wi-Fi password? Changed. Shared bank account? Frozen. Every device in the house that had her fingerprint or face scan? Reset. The only thing I left untouched was the kitchen calendar with our kids' school events. Some things still mattered more than revenge. That night I sat alone in the garage watching her lover laugh on my screen as one of the kids rode a tiny bike with training wheels past the fence. They looked like a family. Mine looked like fiction. And it was just beginning. I didn't sleep for 2 nights after seeing those kids. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was replacement. Watching her tuck in children that weren't mine in a house I'd never been invited to triggered something far deeper than anger. It was annihilation of identity, of marriage, of the story I'd believed about my life. But I didn't rage. I planned. First, I went to see Evan, my brother, my opposite in every way except loyalty. While I explained things in quiet, measured tones, he looked at me like I'd told him the world had ended. I handed him the notarized power of attorney forms the next morning. His job would be to help me separate the business assets cleanly. Officially, Mia was a co-founder. Unofficially, I made sure she was expendable. We built our tech firm 5 years ago, back when we still talked over wine and shared midnight pizza at the office. Her shares gave her voting rights. So I gave Evan control over 50% of mine and instructed him to trigger a motion, quietly reassigning half the operations under a shell entity I'd spent the past week assembling. She wouldn't even realize it was happening. Not until the paperwork hit. At the same time, I reached out to Trent, an old friend from high school who now worked real estate downtown. He owed me a favor or two. I gave him a fictional startup name, a dummy business plan, and wired money through a clean offshore account. By the end of the week, I was leasing the office unit right next to her lover's, a glass-walled corner suite with a perfect line of sight into his windows. While my team set up routers and cameras, I sat in the shadows, listening. They left doors cracked open, held long phone calls on speaker, laughed too loud at inside jokes. It didn't take long before I captured names, dates, even jokes that matched her messages. But I wanted more than hearsay. I needed irrefutable evidence, something no apology could erase. That's when I remembered an old email address Mia used in college, one she linked to a Pinterest account and forgot to secure. It was still connected to her recovery email. One guest reset the password. I was in, and what I found chilled me. Dozens of messages, some to a divorce attorney, time-stamped a month ago, others discussing custody terms in case things turned. Then one attachment, a medical certificate, a pregnancy confirmation, the date. That's what struck me. She hadn't touched me in nearly 2 months before that, and I'd had a vasectomy 2 years prior. No possible way. I closed my laptop slowly, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling as a coldness washed over me. I wasn't just being replaced. I was being rewritten. That afternoon, I made another call, this time to a private diagnostics lab. Discreet DNA services. I booked under an alias and submitted swabs from our bathroom. Her toothbrush, her hairbrush, a nail clipping. It felt invasive and wrong, and I hated myself for it, but not enough to stop. The next morning, I bought her a bouquet. Peonies, her favorite. I included a note congratulating her and added a prenatal massage gift card, making sure the handwriting looked like mine used to. Warm, unguarded. I watched her eyes sparkle as she opened the box. For a second, I wondered if I was wrong, if maybe, just maybe, all of this was a misread. But then she whispered something to her phone while touching her stomach, and my gut twisted all over again. 2 nights later, I sat in my study, watching the final lab results appear on screen. The test matched her DNA to the mail sample I'd collected from the office trash next door. A saliva-soaked coffee lid, carelessly discarded by the man who'd stolen my wife. The match was strong. Too strong to be anything else. Not only were they intimate, but the DNA pointed to paternity. She was carrying his child. My hands didn't tremble. My breath didn't catch. I just felt still, like something inside had snapped into place. Not broken, hardened. That night, I assembled everything. Photos, voice recordings, screenshots, paper trails, a full dossier. It was thick enough to slam on a table. I almost hoped she would ask what I was working on. She didn't. I emailed my attorney at dawn. We scheduled the first filing, petitioning for the termination of joint custody based on emotional manipulation and medical fraud. I wasn't just cutting her out. I was walling her off completely. By noon, her name was scrubbed from the business registry. At 2, her access to our accounts was revoked. By dinner, her face scan failed to open the car door. Her email bounced. Netflix asked for new payment. Spotify was locked. Even the grocery app threw an error. She was digitally exiled, cut off from the house she lived in, from the world we built. At midnight, she stood outside the front door, tapping her phone. I watched her through the peephole. She knocked, soft at first, then harder. She was crying. I didn't open. She slept in her car that night. Or maybe she went to his. I didn't care. And yet, somewhere beneath the steel and silence I'd constructed, I felt a bitter tremor. Not pity, not remorse, just exhaustion. I had more moves to make, more things to strip away, and I wasn't done, not by a long shot. I wanted to erase her quietly at first, cut her out of our lives like a surgeon removing a malignant growth. But the deeper I dug, the more I realized silence wasn't justice. Mia wasn't just cheating, she was rewriting history, retelling our life with her, in the role of victim, brave mother, saintly woman trapped in a cold marriage. It wasn't enough to protect myself or even the kids anymore. She had to be exposed, and not just to me. I needed the right stage. It started with the gala. Mia had been invited to speak at a charity auction downtown, some fluff event she joined through her company's outreach program. The theme was Mothers of the Year, a showcase of successful, modern women balancing careers and family. The irony alone made me grind my teeth, so I paid a visit to the event coordinator, a man with a fondness for bourbon and quiet bribes. He didn't ask many questions once the envelope landed in his hand. For a modest fee, he agreed to let me swap out the scheduled presentation with a tribute video. All I had to do was deliver the footage 48 hours before the event. And oh, did I deliver. I contacted a video production team. No amateurs. These were professionals who knew how to slice moments together for maximum emotional punch. I gave them everything. The home footage of her with her lover, the documents, photos, audio clips, copies of her correspondence with lawyers, even her cousin's deed for that house in the hills. They edited it like a short documentary. Tasteful, harrowing, devastating. The title card read, Mother of the Year, The Real Story. The morning of the event, I dressed like nothing was wrong. I dropped the kids at school, made small talk with our neighbor about a tree root tearing up the sidewalk. Mia left in her usual heels and designer coat, swiping on lipstick in the mirror, never once noticing that the GPS on her keys had been replaced with a dummy. She thought I'd stopped watching. She thought I was gone. At 7:43 p.m., the ballroom darkened. The audience hushed as the first frame appeared on the massive screen behind the podium. I wasn't inside, but I didn't need to be. I stood by the exit doors just far enough to see the color drain from her face when her own voice echoed across the hall, cooing to another man's child, giggling through the haze of deceit. Some of the guests gasped. One woman stood and yanked her own daughter by the arm to leave. A child cried. When it ended, she was frozen behind the podium. Her boss stood slowly, then walked out without a word. 2 sponsors followed. No one clapped. I stepped forward from the shadows, placed a sealed envelope in her hand, and whispered only one word. Serve. She didn't move. Not at first. But her eyes were wild, darting across the room like a caged animal, looking for an exit that no longer existed. That night, I sent a package to the State Family Services Department, a digital dossier labeled with her full name and an overview of what I'd observed over the past 3 months. I noted the emotional volatility, the contradictory stories, the pregnancy that couldn't be mine, the false address registered under her name. I didn't need to accuse. The documentation spoke for itself. The very next morning, a court officer delivered a notice to Mia on our front lawn. She had been served with a restraining order, temporary no contact with the children. She screamed. The neighbor across the street watched from behind her curtain. A dog barked. I stood inside the doorway, not smiling, not gloating, just breathing. By noon, her access to social media vanished, suspended over fraudulent impersonation and emotional exploitation, thanks to multiple complaints filed through my legal team. I kept things quiet, clinical. She lost thousands of followers in hours. At 3:17 p.m., she tried entering the house again. The front gate didn't respond. The new locks rejected her key. She pounded on the door until her knuckles bled, yelling things I couldn't understand through the insulated glass. She didn't know I had already installed security cameras in the yard and affixed a sign above the porch. Protected property, monitored 24/7. I filed the final document that evening, a petition to the family trust board. My grandfather had created the trust for future generations, and I was the managing trustee. I presented my case to the board members, detailing the breach of fiduciary and moral duty by a co-beneficiary. They didn't hesitate. 2 weeks later, she received a plain letter with a firm header. Notice of suspension of trust disbursement rights. Term duration, 10 years. It was legal, cold, binding. She'd lost everything in silence. But I didn't stop there. I launched a foundation, the Thomas Grant Initiative, named after my grandfather, focused on children affected by divorce and parental instability. It wasn't just a gesture. I poured every cent of the frozen disbursement into it, publicly tying her scandal to the charity. Press picked it up gently, cautiously, not sensationalist, just factual. The timing was surgical. The next time Mia stepped into a bank, she found her account still locked. The next time she called a friend, the line rang once, then went dead. I hadn't isolated her. She'd done that herself. I'd simply made sure the light stayed on long enough for her to see it all unravel. That was the plan all along. Not revenge, control. She lit the fire. I handed her the gasoline and made sure everyone saw the match. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more move, and I'd saved it for the end. After the court signed off on the custody arrangement and froze her disbursement rights, Mia stopped fighting. For someone who'd woven an entire second life in the shadows, she shrank quickly once the spotlight hit her. She didn't contest the filings. She didn't return to the country house. And she never tried to explain the pregnancy. She vanished, quietly. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she took a temporary HR contract in another city, started staying in someone else's guest room. The man, the one who brought gifts and carried her photo in his car, never showed up again. Whether he ran or she chased him off, I didn't care. The show was over. I sold the house off-market to a couple from Oregon who wanted to raise chickens and homeschool twins. They paid in full. I didn't stay to watch them move in. I just signed the papers, packed what mattered, and drove north with the kids asleep in the back seat. We settled in Wyoming. Land spread wide like silence. My late grandfather had left a small patch of it to my father, who never used it. I bought the neighboring lot and expanded the ranch. By the end of the first month, I'd learned to saddle a horse, fix an irrigation pipe, and fall asleep to the sound of wind instead of traffic. I didn't trust schools, not after what the legal system taught me about blind loyalty. So I hired tutors, local ones, retired teachers who preferred chalk to tablets. My kids adjusted faster than I expected. They loved the horses. They laughed again. We changed our names, me and the kids, not out of fear, out of clarity. I wanted no remnants of Mia's legacy carried forward. A name tied to her was a leash to the past, and I wasn't dragging it any further. In the mornings, I fed the horses. Afternoons, I worked in the barn restoring old furniture, some pieces I salvaged from secondhand shops, others left abandoned in the empty houses. I built new things from broken ones. There was something poetic in that. At night, I made fresh bread, read adventure novels out loud, and tucked my kids in before sitting on the porch with coffee cooling in my hands. For the first time in years, no one lied to me, not even myself. On the 1-year anniversary of that charity gala, I mailed myself a letter. I'd written it a week after the courtroom ruled in my favor, when the judge looked Mia dead in the eyes and said, "You've demonstrated willful misrepresentation of familial roles and finances." That day, I walked out of the building with full legal custody and a quiet kind of victory. The letter was simple, just one sentence. You chose the truth. I keep it now in the kitchen drawer between old photos and antique recipe cards, a reminder that I didn't lose myself in rage. I buried her world without fire. Mia tried once more. 6 months later, a petition for visitation rights. Her lawyer sent it quietly, perhaps hoping I wouldn't notice the fine print about shared holidays and future amendments. I responded with 83 pages of annotated evidence, a psychological review by a court-appointed evaluator, and a signed letter from our pediatric therapist explaining the long-term effects of emotional whiplash on children. The court denied the request. I didn't celebrate. I just made pancakes and spent the morning building a treehouse with my son, while my daughter drew blueprints for a secret reading hideout under the deck. 2 months after that, I finalized a publishing deal for a memoir. They wanted a title that leaned into the drama, but I insisted on something quieter. We settled on What She Left Behind, A Father's Guide to Starting Over. It sold better than I expected. I recorded a few lectures, launched a digital course about rebuilding life after infidelity. Direct, pragmatic, no hand-holding. The first payment from her frozen trust finally cleared. I didn't touch a cent. Instead, I donated the entire amount to a scholarship for children whose parents were incarcerated or caught in messy custody battles. I made sure the fund was established under her maiden name. She'll get the tax notifications. She'll know. Last week, the local elementary school hosted a fall fair, pie contest, archery range, petting zoo. I entered the apple pie bake-off, not thinking much of it, just following the recipe from an old notebook my grandmother used to keep in her sewing kit. I won. My son was proud. My daughter took a photo of me holding the ribbon. It wasn't about the pie. It was about a new kind of life. Simple, honest, earned. And this morning, I took the final step. I pulled out the old phone I used to carry back when she was still part of this life. The one with photos I no longer looked at, contacts I never called. Her number still sat there, unblocked, untouched, like a splinter in the skin of my past. I stared at it for a while, thumb hovering. Then I did something different. I deleted her number, didn't hesitate, didn't wonder if I'd regret it. I put the phone in a cardboard box, sealed it with tape, and handed it to the mailman who picks up packages from the ranch. He asked if it needed a return address. No, I said, then paused. Just get rid of it. The sun dipped behind the ridgeline, shadows stretching long over the dirt road. The horses were quiet. The kids were inside, laughing about something I'd never understand but loved hearing anyway. I leaned back in the porch chair, let the coffee go cold, and listened to the stillness settle in around me. There was no rage left, no sadness, no memory worth revisiting. She was gone, and she wasn't coming back. That's all for now, folks. Thank you for being with me today and listened. And if you liked my story, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below what you think about all this and what would you do if you were me. Also, don't forget to check my other stories in description below.